Hello and welcome to the Commander's Quarters. I'm your host Mitch, glad to have you here. Today's episode is going to be another one on budget commander staples. On episodes like this one, I'm going to take you through 10 different cards that fit into the same role. So just a quick note before we get started, all of these rankings are going to be completely subjective and they're all very deck dependent. When I'm ranking these cards, I'm doing so with a lot of different factors in mind. So take that into account if you don't see a card that you thought would be on the list, or if it's in a lower ranking than you wanted it to be. As always with the Commander's Quarters, we have a budget restriction on these cards. So every single one of these cards has to be $1 or less on their own. Prices are powered by this channel sponsor, TCG Player. Before we get started, make sure you go hit that subscribe button so you can stay up to date on the latest Commander's Quarters videos. So on today's budget commander staples, we're going to be going through the top 10 Mana Dorks. A few things to keep in mind specifically for these rankings on Mana Dorks. The best Mana Dorks are green. Hands down, that's just how it is. One of the factors that I want to take into account with these rankings is being able to use the card in a wide variety of decks. So for example, there are going to be times that I rank a colorless Mana Dork above a green Mana Dork, even though it might not be more powerful in a green specific deck. Alright, now that that's all explained, let's start at number 10. Coming in at number 10 is going to be Voyaging Satyr. Voyaging Satyr is a 1/2 Satyr Druid that costs 1 and a green. It has tap, untap, target land. Now this card is great in many decks and can be fantastic in the right deck. With the right lands in play, this card can really help you fix your mana. And if you have a land that taps for more than 1 mana, Voyaging Satyr is going to be even more effective. This is a Mana Dork that really shines in the right deck. And at just 7 cents, it can fit into any budget. Now let's move on to number 9 in this list. Coming in at number 9, we've got 3 Mana Dorks that are pretty much the exact same. Manikin, Hedron Crawler, and Manikin each cost 2 and can tap for a colorless. There are some minor differences between them, including their power and toughness, and the fact that whenever Manikin taps, you have to put the top card of your library into your graveyard. In some decks that can help you, in some decks it can hurt you, and in most decks it's a non-factor. The best part about these Mana Dorks though is that they come out early and they can fit into any deck. They especially work great in non-green monocolored decks. These guys come in huge in a deck like Zada Hedron Grinder. And they're all very affordable at 14 cents, 8 cents, and 10 cents. Alright, next up we've got number 8. Coming in at number 8 is Pilate Amir. Pilate Amir is very similar to those last Mana Dorks that we just looked over, but he has one significant difference. Not only can Pilate Amir tap for colorless, but it also has Infect. This is one of the only, if not the only Mana Dork that your opponents will actually be afraid of. In the right deck, Pilate Amir can even be a secondary win condition. All you have to do is get his power up to 10 and hit your opponents once and they're dead. This works great in a deck like Zada or even Yargle. So depending on the deck, he can even be your best option for a Mana Dork in the deck. And that's why even though he taps for a single colorless, he comes in at number 8. At 63 cents though, he can be a little pricey depending on what your budget restriction is. So make sure you take that into account. Time to move on to number 7. At number 7, we've got 3 Mana Dorks that pretty much do the exact same thing for most decks. Drover of the Mighty, Mana Weft Sliver, and Gemhide Sliver each cost 1 and a green and can tap for 1 mana of any color. All of them are 1/1s, but Drover of the Mighty can actually be a 3/3 if you control a dinosaur. And then both Mana Weft and Gemhide Sliver give all of your slivers that ability to tap for 1 mana of any color. So each of these cards can be better in a specific tribal deck or just in a deck with changelings. All in all, they're great additions to multicolored decks that include green since they can tap for 1 mana of any color. Drover the Mighty is pretty affordable for a Mana Dork at only 30 cents. But Mana Weft and Gemhide Sliver are both a little more expensive at 79 cents and 69 cents respectively. So take that into consideration when you're building within your budget. Next up is number 6. Coming in at that rank is Pilate Amir. Pilate Amir is a 2/2 mirror that costs 3 and it can tap for 2 colorless. Now if I have a choice, I usually like to keep my Mana Dorks costing 2 or less. But I make an exception for Pilate Amir, especially in decks that need to ramp quickly like Nezahal. Even though it doesn't help us with fixing, it's pretty much a worn Power Stone on a stick, which is very powerful. At only 25 cents, this guy is a steal. Alright, on to number 5. Coming in at number 5, we've got the Mirror Cycle. Each of these mirrors costs 2, is a 1/1, and can tap for 1 color. These are probably the best colorless Mana Dorks out there since they come down early and they help us with fixing. Gold, silver, leaden, and iron mirror can really find a place in a lot of decks. Copper mirror is kind of useless though since it is in green, and green has a lot of other options when it comes to Mana Dorks. Each of these Mana Dorks is around 10 cents though, so you can fit them into pretty much any budget. Now it's time to move on to number 4. Coming in at 4th place is going to be Elves of Deep Shadow. Elves of Deep Shadow is a 1/1 elf druid that costs a green. You can tap it to add black to your mana pool, and then it deals 1 damage to you. In general, my opinion is that Mana Dorks that cost 1 are almost always going to be better than Mana Dorks that cost more than that. While Elves of Deep Shadow does have a drawback since it deals damage to you, it still helps you fix your mana by adding a black to your mana pool. At only 25 cents, this card is also very affordable for the vast majority of decks. And now we're going to be moving into the top 3 Mana Dorks. Coming in at 3rd place is going to be Arbor Elf. Arbor Elf is a 1/1 elf druid that costs a green, and it can tap to untap a forest. Again, any Mana Dork that can come down turn 1 is going to be good in my book. Now with this guy, you need to make sure that you have a decent amount of forest in your deck for him to be effective. And if you have a land like Breeding Pool in play, he can be even more effective than the Mana Dorks that are above him. But since this is a budget show, I'm just going to assume that we don't have those expensive lands, so he's going to stay at number 3. And at 23 cents, he's still not too bad of a deal. And now let's go on to number 2. In second place is Avacyn's Pilgrim. Avacyn's Pilgrim is a 1/1 human monk that costs a green and can tap for a white. This little guy comes down early and can help fix your mana. In fact, the only real downside to this card is that it can only be used in decks that have both green and white, because even though it's the number 2 mana dork on our list, it still only costs 11 cents. Without further ado, let's move on to the number 1 mana dork on our list. Coming in at first place is going to be Lena Elves and Elvish Mystic. Outside of their names, these cards are 100% the exact same. They are each 1/1 elf druids that cost a green and can tap for a green. These are pretty much the go-to mana dorks for any deck that includes green. While they can't help you fix your mana like Avacyn's Pilgrim or Elves of Deep Shadow, they can be used in a wider variety of decks. This wide range of use and their ability to quickly ramp you is the reason that they're number 1 in my book. At around 15 cents each, these cards are a steal in my opinion. But let's say your budget's a little more flexible. What are some other mana dorks that you could consider? Let's go through our reasonable upgrades to see what some of those cards just might be. First up, we've got Finehorn Elves, which comes in at $1.99. Finehorn Elves is an exact copy of Elvish Mystic and Lena Elves. And having another copy of that in your deck can be great. But since this card hasn't been reprinted very often, it's much more expensive comparatively. Then we've got Birds of Paradise, which will cost you $7.18. Birds of Paradise is a 0/1 flying bird that costs a green and can tap for 1 mana of any color. This mana dork is just strictly better than any of the other mana dorks that we've talked about today. Not only can we get it out on turn 1 to ramp us quickly, but it also can fix us by tapping for 1 mana of any color. But if you have the budget, this card can be a great add to your deck. Finally, we've got Sylvan Caryatid, which comes in at $3.42. Sylvan Caryatid is a 0/3 plant with Defender and Hexproof, and it costs 1 and a green, and you can tap it to add 1 mana of any color. So although this does take 1 more turn to get out than Birds of Paradise, it does have some benefits to it. With its 3 toughness, it can actually be a good blocker early in the game. And also, since it has Hexproof, it's going to be harder for our opponents to deal with it. Sylvan Caryatid is just another good early mana dork that can help you fix your mana. And with that, our show is coming to an end, but I really just want to hear about what you guys think about these budget staples, so why don't you let me know in the comments below. When you're buying budget staples like these, make sure you're doing so on tcgplayer.com, because not only do they have great prices, but they also sponsor this show. So by supporting them, you're helping support the Commander's Quarters. The link for all these budget staples can be found in the description below. And make sure you're following the Commander's Quarters on both Twitter and Facebook to get an early hint on who the next commander just might be for our deck techs. Links to our Twitter and Facebook can also be found in the description. Also in the description, you'll find a link to the Commander's Quarters Patreon page, and I just want to say a quick thank you to the patrons who have subscribed so far. There are many benefits to being a patron for the Commander's Quarters, including being able to vote on future commanders for deck techs. There's even a general tier where you can have your own personalized deck tech dedicated to you. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure you like it and subscribe to the channel. Also, go check out some of our other episodes on budget staples and on budget deck techs. And with that, I'm out of here. Thanks again and have a good one.